For those of us on the internet, I'd like to tell everybody that this is our Lord's Supper talk. We do, in addition to our sermon, we do a Lord's Supper talk, which is a short talk about what the significance of the Lord's Supper is, which reminds us each week about it and brings us in our minds a mindset that is conducive for that, is what this is hopefully going to do, and to give us just a little more knowledge as well. So today I'd like to look at Luke 22, verses 19 through 20, 2 verses. And I think I used some of these verses last time I did the Lord's Supper talk. So I'm going to hopefully not be redundant in my message, though, if I use the same scriptures. So in these verses, this is Jesus, and he's here at the Last Supper, and he's talking to the disciples. And he says, and he took the bread, and he gave thanks, and he broke it, and he gave it to them, and saying, "This is my body, given to you. Do this in remembrance of me." And in the same way, this is verse 20, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out for you." Now, I really have just really 2 basic points today. And that is, one, with everything going on in the world today, with the media the way it is, with the internet the way it is, and I'll give an example, we have basically the news media, we have people on the internet and things on there who don't give any care about what we do or how we exist or about our Christianity at all. And they don't care about themselves either, because what they're doing is they are telling us one thing one day and then telling us something completely opposite the next day for their benefit. And they expect us to just believe it, right? Well, what the Lord's Supper does is helps us to have a touchstone back to reality, back to what is important. Every week we do this, every week. And that makes it important. And that so we can know what's real, what's true, and what's important. And we don't believe what men are telling us. Because men are lying to us. You're being lied to every single day. If you believe anything that's in the news media, or if you believe anything on the internet and you take it seriously, you're being fooled and you're being lied to. That's my one point. And that's one thing that the Lord's Supper helps us to do, is to sort through all that. Because this doesn't lie. This is the same every week, every day. Every day when we wake up, we're Christian. We're not a different Christian because the internet said, oh, Christians are different. I saw an article just the other day, the Atlantic, if you can believe the Atlantic, if you know what that is. If you don't, just check it out. You'll understand what I'm saying. Saying how evangelical Christians are breaking up. The church is breaking up. They'd like you to believe that, wouldn't they? Wouldn't the liberals in the world love you to think that the church is breaking up? Well, it's not. The church, the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And so that's my first point. Second point is, there are 2 things here that if we don't do the Lord's Supper, we fail to do. First of all, Jesus said very specifically in verse 19, and he took the Lord's Supper, broke it, and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body given to you. Do this in remembrance of me." If you do not do this, you are not remembering Christ. It's that simple. You're not remembering Christ in the way he would like to be remembered. Sure, a lot of people go, oh yeah, I know who Christ is. I know his name. But do you really know who Christ is? Are you remembering how Christ wanted you to remember him? Because that's what he's telling you here. This is how you remember me. So if you don't do this, you're failing to remember Christ. Secondly, in the same way, after the supper, he took the cup, saying, "This cup is the new covenant in my blood, which is poured out to you." If you fail to observe the Lord's Supper when we are supposed to observe the Lord's Supper, which is every time we meet, you are not observing the new covenant, which is the New Testament, which is Christ's church. You are denying Christ's church, essentially. So these are important things, and these 2 verses encapsulate that. And this is not men talking here. This is Christ. This is red letters. So regardless of if we have difficulty with this, we cannot really argue too much with the authority that it has here. So if we have difficulty with it, that's a problem we need to get over in our minds, not Christ changing from day to day like the news media does. So as we get ready for our Lord's Supper, we think about these things, and we will continue on. Thank you.